as the territory of the former Soviet Union that divided the borders of the CIS, with its many colors, and formulated the modern political map of Russia. By the end of this year only, the first religious map of our country had been appeared on the internet. It shows the influence of the non-traditional religious and the so-called sects. The multiplicity leads to a thought that can be today a running point for the residents of the state. The sect is a breakaway from the religious group of believers, adheres to their views and interpretation of the individual, the main dogmas of the faith, its rites, teachings. A sect is characterized by isolation, exclusivity of its role. As in Russia, the largest religions of Adyghea are the so-called traditional religions. The internet blogs contain a lot of criticism about the passive position of the confessions regarding the breedings of the sects. The representatives of the confessions in Adyghea refute such an opinion. In the years 92, 93 and 94, most of the sects were located in Dokhtomskoye region, through the river Kuban, as they say. They built 2 houses and established there the institution of Jehovah's Witnesses and started preaching in the village. Several TV and videos show them among the Circassian Muslim population. I asked to appoint a meeting with the famous manager Leo Martinson, who studied the Circassian language to blackmail the Adyghes in order to fraudulently get people into the religion. I was unable for 3 or 4 years to meet him. I was forced to appeal to the head of administration, Nikolai Vasilyevich Demchenko, and district attorney, who supported me, and we just declared war.
Надо не столько бороться с сектами,
we should not fight with many sects, and we should do our work too. What Nurbi Musovic says is correct. If they do immediately build a hole in the kingdoms, and even a room, we have many months and sometimes years to knock out for a piece of land. An example of this is the construction of the Cathedral of Assumption in the city of Mykov. We try to teach in schools of the law of God in any case. Even just talking about the religion, which is a culture forming, about Islam, and where they are Buddhists we talk about Buddhism, where they are Jews about Judaism. After going through quite wide doors of the Russian legislation, religious organizations have fairly an isolated life. The term sect is not used except in rare cases in the regulations of the Russian Federation. Any sect may, in accordance with the federal law on freedom of conscience and unreligious association, register as a religious organization or act as a religious group, as its creed and performance of religious rites do not involve any injury to citizens' health or otherwise harm their personality and rights, or by inciting citizens to refuse to fulfill their civil duties. By what criteria can be identified sectarian assault on the rights of citizens? The activity of a number of sects in different countries, including Russia, are high-profile criminal cases. So the police tried 3 times to bring to justice Rudneyev, the leader of the sect Shambhala. According to police, many of those who enter the sect completely lose its ties with relatives and friends. The members of the sect promote sexual orgies. In November 1999, 5 members of the religious sect of Yakutia were convicted by the city court for torture 10 years old who died from beating. In August 2008, the district court of Penza region decided to apply compulsory treatment to the former leader of Penza, Peter Kuznetsov. On July 2008, court of Moscow had sentenced to 11 years in prison Grubov Grigory, the founder of the sect. He was charged with obtaining money for the resurrection of the dead. The federal law on countering extremism has broadened the scope of the law enforces. Significant influence of the Mykovsky district of Adyghea uses, for example, the so-called believers. They call themselves internationally faiths, and one of the first activities of the center faced the preventive activities of the anti-extremism led by the Ministry of Interior of the Republic of Adyghea. The most interesting and ironic is that in different regions the sects are treated in different ways. In some areas the organization are not touched, and in some regions for some reasons they get a lot of attention. In this case paid attention to us. Although we had no organization and there were only individuals who supported Rodnoverchskaya area, including me, I and two more persons were allocated in special groups, attributed us so kind of sect, recorded us in the sect and decided with us to deal politically. And legally this group was liquidated by a court decision, though I emphasize that there were no group at all. The interesting thing is that the number of 28 people signed a petition in protection of one of the religious organizations in the city of Krasnodar. There is a law in the treatment of citizens, and as we are citizens of the Russian Federation, then no one can deprive us of citizenship. We appealed to Moscow on behalf of this organization. What kind of organization is it? It was the Valka community in the city of Krasnodar, and here we are. Due to the fact that we have signed an appeal in support of this organization as citizens, our local center of anti-extremism, coupled with our valiant prosecutors, have decided to allocate 3 of us, me and 2 more people, that we are active participants. I've even conducted on a search list. In Adyghea, there are other powerful religious forces, but their religion is exported from the countries of the West. The Jehovah's Witnesses, Evangelical Christian, Baptists, Protestants, they all call themselves Christians. Unfortunately, there are quite a few examples of the consequences that result in disputes about the purity of the faith. The most innocuous example of this can be considered the well-known case when Pope Benedict offered his hand to the representative of the Church of Evangelical Christian Baptists. When I meet with the people in our society, in the Russian society, whether Baptist, whether Muslim, whether it is a Pentecostal, whether atheist, if this man is worthy of respect, I'm always the first to hold out his hand. Protestants in Adyghea is quite close to the secular world, but in internet blogs we could read about them a few interesting and disturbing things. New challenge of the spiritual life of the country were initiatives to evangelization of the Caucasus population. These initiatives come from the United States. The Americans registered in my corp non-profit partnership business support Jewish and then another non-profit partnership business support summit. The founders are Russian citizens and the heads of the Americans. One of the leaders who stood the basic of creating Jewish in my group was Jim Tilton, with whom I was personally acquainted, and took part in the communication on the perspective for mutually beneficial cooperation. We decided to organize joint seminars for those jobless citizens of my group who wished to start their own business. In 2006 and 2007, the Jewish suggested to broaden the scope of cooperation to the level of microcredit. Successfully completing the Physics-Mathematical Department at the State University of Adyghea, Andrew decided to establish his own printing press. After receiving counseling at the Moscow University, he began looking for investors. I was addressed primarily to the commercial banks in the territory of the Republic of Adyghea, and so through a friend got on Juldish, which then helped us. Juldish, the American-Russian non-governmental center of financial support and advice of small business, in Adyghea, was working about 4 years. The territory of Adyghea is attractive because first, there is a small business located on the rather weak development stage, and we can really help a business maybe reconsider some priorities and approaches in the implementation of business itself. Registered in the Ministry of Justice as a non-governmental organization Juldish, and does not promote the views of Protestants, but when reading the internet, the sense of the project Juldish pursue one goal: to support the spread of evangelism through the development of small business. All would be nothing but the questions that are unlikely to respond to Americans. Why the emphasis is only on the Muslim people of Russia, and Russians should be excluded from participation in the project. What is the conspiracy to support missionary work, and what is the need to maintain confidentially by signing a security cooperative agreement, and in case some crisis situation? Why the US Embassy in Moscow is interested in the activities of this non-governmental organization, which in the case of Newton's crisis situation sends an email notification. And finally, if you are doing just missionary activity, what is the compromising documents and files that need to be destroyed? We decided to directly ask the head of Jewish about everything, but they refused to make a direct contact with the journalist and asked us to code. Again, I returned to my suggestion. You could have it open in front of the camera to comment on. I even gave you a printout of these blocks. As I understand, it's your program, and it discusses religious organization. Everyone writes something that he considers it necessary. If it's so, let's say this is the true truth. If you think it's not true, then it does not worth to refute openly in front of the television camera. Now let it be this way. Well, if there were some facts, for example, they came out of the frame of the law, or something else, there is the Ministry of Justice, which monitors our activities. If something goes wrong, we will be told about it. Let's step aside for a moment from the present day and turn to the history of the Great Patriotic War. Within the declassified Nazi plan OST, which was released in late 2009, in terms of the German government, the Third Reich planned to release the living space for the Germans and for other Germanic people. The plan was developed in 1941. Finally, Hitler planned to destroy the Soviet Union, dividing the country into many isolated parts, and the bid was made, as well as the destruction of the remaining foundation, the religious population. It should be avoided that in order to justify one charge religious needs of large areas, each village must be turned into an independent sect. If some of the villages, as a result, they want to practice black magic, as doing Negroes and Indians, we should not do anything to prevent them. Our policy on the broad expanse, meaning the Soviet Union, should be to encourage any form of separation and division. Looking at the maps of the former Soviet Union, we can say that today the Plan OST is implemented without the participation of Hitler. His place was virtually taken overseas directors. According to the committee of the State Duma of the beginning of the perestroika in our country, every year drives 150 to 200,000 sectarian missionaries. Formally, they are working on legitimate legal field, but their grain, dismemberment of the spiritual world, germinates until the outstanding issue.